you can optimize the hell out of your pricing page and all of your marketing materials.
The machine can tell you which works, but not the underlying cause behind it.
There really sort of is still no substitute for that qualitative sort of deep dive interactive experience.
Okay, guys, so I would love to welcome you on this panel. We will talk about A/B testing. We would dive into the approaches and the benefits of A/B testing. So first of all, I want you to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Right, sure. So I'm Lukas. I'm currently the product development manager, probably. I'm in charge of the research and development of a software as a service tool, Boosterberg. In the past, I have been a member of various developer teams, including MeWe, that's applications for social media similar to Facebook, actually, from the US, and before that, just web development in general. And well, currently we are busy developing our software as a service, a Boosterberg that you can see behind me. And I'm in the business of web and application development for about 8 to 10 years. So that's about it.
Okay, so we would continue with Andrew.
Yep. So I'm one of the founding partners of Optimotive, and we help companies launch and scale new brands, new products, and enter into new markets. We've got a diverse, decentralized team across the US and Europe, and we've been around for about 3.5 years. Mm-hmm. Core focuses on website development, growth marketing, and all things paid advertising. So I would say to anybody out there that might be watching this, if you're thinking about launching something new as a strategic priority, we should talk.
Okay, great, thanks. And we would finish it up with Eric.
Hi, everyone. I'm Eric Barnett. I'm the CTO of Pastilla. Pastilla, we are a full-service digital agency. We do digital product design and development and marketing for large private sector and government clients. Me personally, I think I'm maybe a couple years older than the other folks on this panel. I've been doing this for close to 3 decades. So back even for the days before there was an internet. And certainly testing and A/B testing and optimization and UX and user optimization are at the core of what we focus on. So for folks looking for that kind of full service work, taking it from concept through implementation and marketing, we're certainly here and happy to serve.
Thanks for your introduction. Now we are going to talk about first topic is what do you seek from A/B testing and how you run it?
Well, I think there are different approaches how you can view this. First of all, you can do A/B testing on your actual products and your actual things like your marketing, but you can also offer A/B testing for your clients, and this can have different forms. So, well, the elephant in the room, the big buzzword is data-driven, and this is all what A/B testing is about. And well, anyone else want to share maybe how do you approach differently the A/B testing that you do for your clients and maybe for your own company?
I can speak to that. So there's really, I think, 2 main ways that we'll approach A/B testing. I mean, obviously there are some other situations, but for the most part, we're looking at this in 2 ways. Either making quick decisions, typically because we're usually launching new things, right? So if we bring, say, a new product line for a company to market, we're looking at making fast decisions, getting as much information as quickly as possible. And A/B testing is a great way to do that, like which copy is going to resonate more with their customer base, or what's the right audience that's going to establish some product market fit here, something like that. Or in the long term, if we have something that we've identified is working, right? Say Facebook ad campaign, for example, we're seeing results, we've got a solid ROAS, we're driving profitable sales for the company, but we want to improve that over time, either scale that up in terms of volume or improve that on, a cost per acquisition, a cost per sale basis, or something like that. Then that just takes time and A/B testing and iterating over and over again.
I think it's an amazing time for this kind of work and these types of technologies. I mean, if you look backwards at sort of the history and, the poor advertising folks on, Mad Men, I mean, they were lucky to get something like a Nielsen rating, which was like a, sample of, minor sample of, some folks that they would hope would be representative of the whole group, and now, I mean, we can do the most amazing micro-targeting. We can look at analytics, we can pretty much figure out what you had for breakfast and decide if, you need to drink for lunch. I think what's important when you're looking at testing is to look at the context for which you are going to be testing and what value that has to the customer. So, there's really sort of three, I think, legs to that. I mean, one is on the marketing end, which I think you guys were sort of mostly discussing, when you're sort of looking to get folks to respond to a micro-targeted ad or be able to sort of run two side-by-side comparisons and see what's most effective. I think the second is on the content end, right? And that's being able to, for example, when it, apply some level of personalization or even multivariate testing, where in some cases, folks can come in and you can say, hey, what's the experience that's most going to resonate with them? Learn and match sort of your incoming analytics to your response rates and conversions, and really be able to optimize that kind of engagement and experience. And then I think the third is at the product level. And so, for example, we have a engagement now that's that we're working on for Cedars-Sinai Hospital, and they're researchers. So, I mean, it doesn't get any more, being able to handle testing and A/B testing and multivariate than an organization like that. And, and in that case, it's important to actually build that kind of capability into the system, right? Through either messaging or through content, or sometimes through even user experience, so that, in their case, they're looking to measure the efficacy of specific interventions on health outcomes to promote healthy behavior. And if they can't manage along the way to be able to say, well, if we do this one, we get this kind of response, we do that one to get that kind of response, then they've lost their way. And so in that case, it actually factors into the product design. So I think it sort of starts at the very beginning with what is the problem you're looking to solve? And then along the way, what can you implement to help achieve the business goals that your customer might have?
I have a more specific question for, the other panelists, because in some cases, we rely on some black boxes in this kind of decision making, because on Facebook, obviously, the algorithm is the end all and be all, and we just put the creative out there in form of a post, and then, we of course get a data back on which posts perform the best, and then create ads from them, and then look how the ads perform. Do you maybe see any dangers in this black boxing of algorithms? Or of course it works like that, and with the advent of machine learning, it will be even used for like end-to-end solutions. I'm sure that you also implemented things similar to this in your own projects, that the machine learning was used to pick the right creative or the right solution that converts the most. How do you see maybe dangers or maybe the future of this approach to have a black box in between the inputs and the outputs?
Yeah, I can speak to that a bit. So one of the things that we frequently will use testing for, either A/B or multivariate testing, is on ads in order to determine what copy is going to be a best fit for a particular audience we're trying to market to. Maybe that's a new audience for an existing product, or maybe that's something totally new. And so a lot of time having that data off of what is working in terms of the different variations we're testing against is super valuable for us to make decisions. So if that's black boxed, and for sure, there's a lot of platforms like you run Google Ads now, for example, there's options to just say, just put in all your variables, we'll do the math and it's going to work. Just trust the machine to do this. But actually, we don't typically run those campaigns a lot of the time, because the information we get off of what's working and what's not is worth the losing ads being run against the winning ads. So
right.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting thing, because sometimes maybe it's like, we just want to get results, but the information that we learn along the way is super valuable.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is a double-edged sword, and it's a great question, and this has been an issue since, the early days of SEO optimization, right? Because, Google reserves the right at any point to change its algorithm. And I know plenty of, folks who went out of business because Google changed their algorithm, and then all of a sudden they weren't at the top of the search results and couldn't find their way back. I think at the end of the day, you really have no choice but to be adaptive, right? And really sort of be on top of, okay, well, this is working, but understand that at some point it might not work through no fault of your own, simply because something in that black box changed without you knowing or being made aware. And so you're able to sort of, monitor that and understand it as best you can, and come to understand those algorithms. That's generally about as good as you can get. I do think that it's one of the places where, creatives still have a role, because as smart as the machines get, it's really the people that are going to be able to understand the results. I mean, we actually published an article on this recently on the analytics versus instinct and why they're both important. And
they can even recognize the change even faster because, well, from our own experience, the creatives that were working the best in some of our campaigns were totally unexpected. But then the machine can tell you which works, but not the underlying cause behind it. And when a team of creatives gets the feedback that, okay, this works, and they put two and two together, they can see that, okay, now we have to connect the dots and create the creatives that work and what have these in common. And they figured it out, even though they didn't know beforehand that the audience was, for example, very useful and with some anarchistic streaks, maybe. Then they figured it out based on the feedback from the machine learning, and they started to create creatives like that, and they started to work. So machines can maybe tell us statistically what works, but not the underlying cause behind it.
Yeah. I mean, we've run tests for clients in some cases where we have completely killed ideas and projects and concepts based off of the results that we split tested. But that's been a good outcome because now they're not wasting time and money and resources on something that may not have panned out.
Absolutely.
You know, is it perfect? You can always get more data and more information, but we're at least able to make a decision, you know, and move forward in a different way, which is a lot of
and speaking to Lucas's comment, you know, when the machines get to the place where they understand context like that, then I'm worried we'll have Skynet. So I'm happy we're not there yet.
Yeah, the dystopian future. You know, it'd be funny. One day maybe we'll be split testing machine learning models against each other. So it's like like it's one black box against the other, and we'll see what spits out.
So then I have kind of follow-up question: how many variations we should have when we do A/B testing?
Well, I mean,
that's a big question.
That's the scale question, right? Maybe.
Yeah.
Or
context dependent, I would say, for sure, because every situation is going to be a little bit different.
Yeah, you can't really, that's not a one size fits all question. I mean, you can have a individual marketing campaign where you're literally trying out two approaches, and you can have, you know, something like this Eaters project where you can expect to have hundreds, you know, if not more, and, you know, really trying to focus in and learn not just for specific programs, but, you know, groups of programs or contexts or things like this work and things like that don't work, but within things like this that work, here's some, you know, more specific detail about how to hone in. So I mean, that's, you know, you can't sort of answer that question in a linear way.
Oh, but maybe in theory, right? If we are talking just about one thing, for example, different colors of a button and not changing like multiple things at once, then it all depends on how many people you have statistically, how many people you could show it to.
Your sample
because
size.
if you have the sample size big enough, speaking as a sociologist, you can have more and more variations. And if you show it to a randomized sample of people, then you will get your results. At least 50 for each button.
Lucas and Andrew, what do you guys think in terms of sort of the role of sort of, you know, focus groups and qualitative analysis versus sort of hard metrics? I'm curious to get to know what you guys think about sort of what role that still plays in today's approaches.
I think that's super valuable. Sorry, I can speak to that first. I think that's super valuable. And actually, we do a lot of surveys and a lot of sort of modified focus groups where we try to actually get a blend of both. So you guys are probably familiar with like NPS scores and similar frameworks for getting, you know, hard numbers associated with feedback. And so typically what we'll do when we run that kind of qualitative feedback is we'll also make sure to get a score or some kind of actual data point from everybody that we can bucket people into. So NPS is one example. We take all the detractors and we bucket all the qualitative feedback into that bucket. Everyone who was, you know, 6 or below, everyone who thought that the product could use work or whatever, we'll take all of their answers, and then we'll actually go through and analyze all of those to see trends and patterns. And we'll do the same thing with the promoters, the people who really, really love the product. And that usually tells us, you know, it's more work and we have to go through with our brains and analyze it, but that'll tell us a lot about what's working outside of the numbers. And so we'll do things like that. And that's just one example. We might use other types of numbers to bucket and segment that qualitative data, but usually we'll try to take that approach sort of like that.
Right. So, well, I'm not actually in the business right now because our product is dealing strictly with data-driven policies and hard numbers. But for the actual marketing of our product, well, one thing is the initial brainstorming that has to have some expert panel that comes up with some ideas based on their experience. They are great in this way. And then in the middle of development, or at the beginning, or maybe if you iterate, we try to use, or also plan on continuing to do so, the actual user testing, right? So to get users that actually could use your product, maybe gather some people from friendly agencies or freelancers, and actually see them how they use the product. And then in a qualitative analysis, you, as Daniel said, you always have to connect the numbers to the actual answers. So add values, and then you can make it quantitative in some way, but even the in-depth interviews with the actual users can help, and seeing them how they use the product.
Yeah. What about you, Eric?
So from my perspective, there really sort of is still no substitute for that qualitative sort of deep dive interactive experience, So from our perspective, it's usually always a mix. Like we'll do some measure of user testing and focus groups, along the way, especially if when you're pre-market, just to try to get some sense of, because, especially when you're in it, or when you're, we just actually went through this now with another client of ours, I don't think I can name, but it's a household brand name. And the key stakeholders were sort of soaking in their own, intellectual property, right? So they would name something and think it was really obvious. And then you would find that, oh, well, maybe that name isn't so obvious. And you need to help people to understand that, because it's obvious to the people who already have that domain expertise. And then you got to ask the question, is the user base primarily going to be people who have that, and for which this will make sense or not? That would have been a hard thing to get post-launch from analytics, but was something that we were able to get pretty clearly just from doing some user testing and focus, and people being like, well, what's that? I don't know what it is. And then clicking on the button and being like, oh, and looking at the feature and saying, oh, I get it, and this is wonderful, but they would have never got there because we named it wrong, right? So to me, it's generally always sort of a both and the qualitative probably has the most value in that sort of, pre-market, when you're still sort of doing ideation and you don't have, or, you're still sort of developing and you don't have those numbers. And then, becomes less important when you can backstop it with, numbers, especially when they're large numbers. But, before you have that, you still need to test your hypothesis.
Yeah. And there's also like the things you don't know that you find out with that
right.
kind of feedback.
Yep.
That is super important.
Yeah, no, great. Exactly. Right. And I think that's the whole point. I don't ever want to, think that the stakeholders in the development team are, fully representative of the end user. And so, as much as possible, try to find people, who can represent that, and, have them take a look before, and, ideally as early as possible. I mean, I think one of the challenges in product design is that it's hard to get focus groups to react well to, say, a set of wireframes or a non-functional prototype. I do like to do non-functional prototyping when possible. But then, again, sort of just because obviously the earlier in the product development that you're able to get that feedback, the less expensive it is. It's always more expensive, in development, but it's most expensive post-launch. So the earlier that you manage to get that feedback, the better, in terms of, being able to course correct if you need to, or make those, or come up with those learnings.
Yeah, and it's also interesting when you talk about stuff from the product perspective, because I've run into a lot in the past, working especially with SaaS companies, but I think for sure this is everybody, B2B companies in particular as well. Onboarding for whatever your product or service is hugely important, and that's usually where my job ends and somebody else's takes over more on the product side. But that gap, either passing off from marketing or passing off from a sales team into the product and just actually getting people to use it, is huge. And if there's missed expectations or things that don't quite line up, and I think there's some danger where you can, especially with A/B testing, kind of coming full circle to this, you can optimize the hell out of your pricing page and all of your marketing materials, but like that's when you run into things like really clickbaity ads and things that don't give people the full expectation of the product. And so looking at things with the whole perspective of ultimately becoming a customer, using the product, getting onboarded, and then staying on as a long-term user, that's usually important too, because I think there's a dark side where optimization can go a little bit too far just looking at the numbers, especially when one job function ends and somebody else's begins. So onboarding is a key place where that happens that I've seen.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's a great point. You can drive as many eyeballs as you want, but if you can't convert them, or you can't keep them, you still don't have a business. So, or a product. So, I mean, that's a really great point. And the role for A/B testing, doesn't end there. I mean, I know a big thing. It's an older buzzword, but the notion of progressive profiling, is still sort of out there. Like, what's the minimum amount of information I need to capture about you, right, to get you to engage with me? And then the longer that you're with me, the more information I can get, and the more I can use that to micro target. But I can't ask you 31 questions at the door that help me optimize that experience, because you're not going to convert.
Yeah, that's the tension between marketers and sales teams always. The marketers are like, hey, can we just put an email field on the form? And the salespeople are like, no, we need a phone number, we need this, we need that. And there's always that kind of tension going on, especially B2B for sure.
Yeah, I've been there.
Yeah, well, and so that's a place that you can actually test, right? Is, well, what if we just ask for this one piece of information? What if we ask for 10 pieces of information? And what's the benefit? So, I mean, with one piece of information, we probably get more people to sign up, but we, have less ability to, respond to them in useful ways. And then if we ask for 10 pieces of information, it's, going to be the reverse, where we know a lot more about the people, but a lot less folks are going to, sort of go past that friction. And which of those is actually the best model for the business? Do we want more highly qualified prospects that, or do we want, less qualified, higher volume of prospects, and which of those is going to give us a better outcome once you've sort of gotten to the point of the funnel where you're trying to convert people?
Yeah, and so I was talking about this for a while. I coined a term for this, and actually, Eric, maybe this is called something else before I started thinking about it. But this idea of negative optimization, which is to say you want to not increase your conversion rate, but decrease your conversion rate, make that conversion rate worse at some step of your funnel or of your process in order to improve quality or to qualify people in some way. So like, great example would be capturing leads. If you want to include something like a phone number, you're going to get fewer people to sign up. That conversion rate is going to look worse. It's going to be a red number, the down arrow in your analytics dashboard. But if that improves the quality of conversations with your sales team, and all of a sudden the sales team is able to get people on the phone and their close rates go up, that might be worth it for the business overall. So stuff like that, or even things like, trying to restrict who actually is qualified to talk to support, and support is responding to less tickets, and then they don't have to, their resources are better spent. People can go to the FAQs.
Exactly.
Things like that.
Especially if you have limited resources, right?
Bigger numbers are not always better. That's really sort of the sliding scale. And, those types of issues existed before we had these kinds of digital optimization tools, right? I mean, that was always a question, right? I mean, marketers run into this, same issue if they're going out and trying to buy leads and do, how good is my list? And, what aspects of that list are there that I want to focus on in order to think that I'm actually going to get a, successful conversion rate. So
yeah, or direct response ads or something like that.
Yeah, right.
Cut it out and send it in the
right. No, exactly. So that's sort of a great question, and it's generating 1 million leads with a 0.000001 conversion rate is not really going to be a win for anyone, except if someone's getting paid by the impression.
Yeah, this is something that I have to explain to some of our users also, that although they will see lower numbers when they switch from traffic analysis based on just clicks and switch to landing page views or maybe some soft conversions, today the numbers will be lower, but your actual goal is not so that people just click and then close the window, but to actually get there and maybe convert. Yeah. I have to explain this over and over again, especially to agencies that need to prove that the better numbers are better for their clients.
One of the things I think can be tough about that is that, and this is a place where the tools, the current tools fail us a little bit, is that, I mean, it's hard sometimes to see that end to end, especially if your customer is not giving you insight into what their actual, say, revenue is, from your campaign, and it sort of stops at the number of, views or, right. So, I mean, you can set up things like, targeting conversions in Google Analytics and so on and so forth, but you really need to have a customer that's going to partner with you, so that you're not just understanding sort of the views or the, the people who clicked on the button, but you're actually understanding how that translates into whatever the ultimate, business goal is. And so it works best when you have customers who are willing to be partners to you, and sort of talk about that end to end, rather than just sort of saying, well, this firm got me these numbers and you get me those numbers. And,
exactly.
What does that mean?
Yeah, attribution is always a huge, huge conversation. Everybody wants perfect attribution, but it's a pain in the ass and it's so hard to get. Even when you have tracking all the way through, it's still a science you have to perfect.
Sure. Well, and yeah, I mean, ideally you want to be able to look at things holistically too, right? Because you don't know, I mean, at some point maybe we'll have microchips in our head and this won't be true. What is the thing? Like it takes, 7 times engaging with something, before somebody actually, is going to make a purchase or something. And you have no idea whether or not you're responsible for 4 of those, but at the end of the day, the person just made the decision later on to go straight to the website and make that purchase, and it's not directly tied to your ad, right? So
yeah. Well, and that actually is a good point, because that's like totally dependent on the purchase size and the sales cycle on that too, right? Like $1 million enterprise software versus I don't know, $40 t-shirt is going to be hugely different as far as what that looks like. And and this gets down to like what your attribution windows are and what the limitations of your tracking are, or maybe even the legal limitations of how long cookies are allowed to stay in people's browsers and things like that, where if the purchase cycle is beyond that, like you can't legally or technically get that information, but it's still important.
I mean, I've worked on projects before, prior incarnations, where it was actually interesting because, the analytics almost didn't help. It was for a client who was leasing out large commercial real estate. So their total universe of like prospects might be like 300, but all they really care about is that one person, signs that lease, right? And so it's basically success was binary. They lease the building or they don't lease the building, right? And they would spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a campaign, but you couldn't measure it because, like you literally, the numbers that you would get weren't big enough, but it was, success was lease the building and failure was not lease the building. And that was it. So, it really just depends.
Did you have like micro or like intermediary actions that were being optimized for along the way in order to make decisions to work up to that big goal?
Within reason, but again, it was tough because the sample size was so small that you could get false numbers, right? Because if you're talking about, well, 10 people looked at this one and 14 people looked at that one, like I would be loath to make a decision that 14 was necessarily better than 10, when the sample size universe was 300, right? That's not really right. I mean, I would consider those to be equal generally, right? I mean, if it was 75 versus 5, I might learn something, but there just wasn't the numbers involved to let you really make decisions, in that case, based on the data.
You know what that makes me think too, and this is really interesting, is I think it's really important to make that distinction between the data point you're optimizing for and how much of a weighted decision-making factor that is, right? Because like 10 people viewing a landing page, sure, maybe, I don't know, that could mean interest, that could mean they just saw it and bounced off. 10 people talking to a salesperson for an hour, that's a huge indicator of interest.
Yes.
There's different things along the way, but what we're measuring is just as important as the numbers behind it. So.
Well, and that sort of speaks to what I was saying before, is if the people you're working with are good partners, then they'll help you understand, okay, these 10 clicks turned into 7 sales calls, and these 14 clicks turned into 2 sales calls. And then you can, make some decision based on that. But if they don't give you that kind of feedback, effectively, then you're sort of stuck, at the point of the click. And, it's harder to qualify its value from a testing perspective, which is a pitch for all clients to be good partners because, we can help you if you help us to help you.
Yeah, for sure. We got to have an open conversation between marketing and sales at the very minimum, and then we can go from there.
I would love to know about some of your experience, like concrete examples, how like biggest wins from A/B testing, if you can share it with us.
When do you guys want to go first? Did enough talking. Okay, I'll go. I guess.
Yeah, go ahead. I'll you.
Okay, I guess the largest engagement that I was on, sort of from a testing perspective, was a project, and there are many folks in Pastilla now who are on this project, although it sort of predates them. Was a engagement that was done for AARP, and it was pretty massive scale. I mean, it was like, Oprah and Dr. Phil and, incoming, household sort of brand name, stuff. The intention of it was to get folks from younger demographic to start to onboard into the AARP ecosystem. And as a result, they were providing series of tools and sort of high level around helping people with problems that they were encountering, 45 to 55, everything from sort of personal, financial to health and lifestyle and, relationship and so on and so forth. And they had engaged all these different experts and created all these personalized programs. And the most important thing was to be able to get people content and programs that they would resonate with, right? Because if I just lost my job, then maybe the thing I don't want front and center is or I'm thinking about a new career, maybe I don't want romantic advice, sort of front and center. And then there was just massive 7-figure ad spends and the goal was really just to sort of be able to drive people, take people into the funnel, sort of get them, programs or things that they would be interested in, and then sort of ultimately convert them, initially to be registrants and then also to sort of purchase services. And sort of even beyond just sort of A/B testing, it really came down to personalization and being able to figure out how to meet people where they lived and ultimately how to best serve that content in a way that was going to be, initially make conversions, but ultimately result in engagement. The learnings were amazing, and it was actually really a formative experience for me in terms of being able to understand the power of personalization. And that's when I was talking about progressive profiling. That was really one of the pieces behind it. Like, okay, well, here's what we know when you first show up, or here's what we know from the channels that you came in on. How do you map those channels to interest groups? What does it mean that somebody came from, watching Dr. Phil's show about this versus, somebody who came from this other particular ad campaign? How would we, then go and be able to target that first experience? And then as we got to know you and as we sort of got to build that profile, what could we do based on the actions that you took inside the system to keep up your engagement? So it was really, it was really something. And for me, at least, was a real formative experience, learning about what worked and also what doesn't work, which was, equally valuable.
Very cool. Well, I can share another win in that case. That's super cool to hear about, by the way, that like huge levels of scale kind of thing. Yeah, one immediate thing that comes to mind was a win that we got for some paid advertising campaigns for one of our clients. It's a manufacturing company based out of the US. They have location in Miami and in California as well. And we've been working on some acquisition campaigns for them for a couple of years now. And it's one of those things where originally this started out as, leadership wasn't necessarily sold fully that this is going to be huge for them, that, these different digital channels we were testing were going to be big, but we started out small, scaled up our ad spend, started running tests. Initially, we had an okay cost per lead, cost per sale, but we just improved that over time. And fast forward, 3 years later, basically, or something like that, we've been able to decrease the cost of acquisition by something like 70% over the life of the campaign, and increase our conversion rate on top of that. So that's decreasing acquisition costs given that fixed conversion rate, but also improving, and some of this is with sales too, because our close rate increases. We knew more on the sales side and so on and so forth. But and there's a second part to this, but I think the main thing with this is really, a lot of times you can do fancy things with technology and with different platforms. And I love using new tools and trying new things, but at the core of A/B testing is just simply iterate. It takes time, it takes some resources. And as you learn and move on to the next test, you can improve things over time to very significant degrees, and granted now it's been several years on this campaign, but this is a significant driver of business for this one client. And in fact, this year with COVID, we actually had a scary moment where when COVID hit, they decided to cut their marketing budget to literally zero, including all of their ad spend, including all of our costs and everything, which was not fun. But quickly after making that decision, realized that that was the only option for them in a COVID world where sales reps can't go in person and there's no in person. And I think we've heard this all before in the last couple of months from different companies, but they realized that, wait a second, this is one of our only options. And now actually that campaign that we started, we've now rolled that into some other business units and expanded on it. But now that's accounting for a fairly, without sharing numbers, a fairly significant amount of their business at this point. But that's only because, you know, if we launched that fresh now without having tested and iterated on this over time, we would not be seeing the results that we are now. You know, we'd be seeing something, and it'd be a start, and for sure it'd be better than doing nothing. But just having worked on this campaign for so long is huge. And so for us, it's a huge win. For the client, for sure. And there's also a little bit of a thank God we had this year because it's been working, which has been good. Okay, so now after you've been talking about how you don't like us fancy tools and so I love fancy tools. This is just one of those core principle things.
Well, you just have to use them where it's appropriate. So if it's a no-brainer, and well, our tool Boosterberg that boosts the posts automatically, and it was a couple of years ago when we first started to get the publishers and other clients in Slovakia, where it all started, to get them on board to start using this. And the nice thing about using such tools is that you don't have to get the whole company on board. You just have to maybe pick the interest of one marketing guy on the company, and he just pays for it himself and tries to use it. And especially in terms of the big publishing houses in Slovakia, the ones that have like 15 different news pages and websites, and they are always trying to drive traffic from Facebook to their pages to monetize it. He started to use Boosterberg, and we also, of course, help him with the initial campaign setup. And well, after like a half a year, we came to him about how it's going, because we had a lot of work before that, and our sales team went from to different clients in Slovakia. And actually, when we put the numbers together, it resulted in results like 70% increase in effectiveness of the cost. So the cost per click went down by 70%, and especially the time that he spent before by just manually clicking on Facebook and trying to optimize the ads by himself, that went down by like 90%. And then later that month, I noticed that his position in the company changed to head of performance marketing. So maybe our tool has something to do with that. And well, that was just another proof that some of the tools can actually work if applied correctly, even if it uses the Facebook black box algorithms. But that's the biggest one that I can think of. And of course, we have some big clients even today that use our product for a couple of years now. I hope that we will manage to be nimble and pivot as necessary, how such technologies evolve.
Lucas, I think you should start by asking him for a part of his raise.
Yeah, well, I think it's a bit late for that, but maybe I will just take him out to beer after this whole COVID mess.
I heard that about you European folks. So.
Okay, guys, thank you for great answers. Last thing I want to touch on is what should users take advantage of? Lucas, I want to start with you. I know Boosterberg got something going on, so can you tell us more about it?
Oh, you mean like in terms of our companies, right? We think that this year it will be all about digital, and we are actually doing a special holiday discount. As I mentioned before, to some of our premium clients, we were doing a full campaign setup. So we'll go through your Facebook pages and audiences and actually set up the rules for the whole end-to-end automation. So Boosterberg will take your posts, create ads from them, look at the ads, stop them if they stop performing. And so if you see the promo for Boosterberg for this holiday season, you can just go to the site and register for a free trial for 2 weeks. Just fill a simple form, and one of our specialists will do a full campaign setup based on your preference, what you fill in the form, and then we will get back to you with a campaign summary, and you can just start it up and have a look how it performs. So this all just for $1. So 2 weeks of a trial period and professional campaign setup for $1. I think that's a good offer.
I can go next in that case. if you are watching this and at your company you are thinking of launching a new brand, a new product line, or getting into a new market, so that might be like a new vertical, or perhaps currently you're in the UK, want to start selling in North America, or you're in the US and want to get into Europe, we can help you do that. And so if you're interested in doing this and you haven't launched the initiative yet, we're offering free market reports on the market opportunity in those areas. So either for that product or for that vertical or for that geographic area. And we'll be happy to work with you to do a little bit of research, do a little analysis, and see if it's worth investing any time or resources or money in that area. So if you want to do that, you can go to optomotive.co, or you can just reach out to me. I assume you'll see my name on this, you can just Google me, and I own all the results, so you can get in touch and we can talk from there.
So over at Pastilla, we're again really more focused on full service digital product design. COVID, in particular, has actually been in some ways a business driver, because a lot of traditional functions, including sort of sales, marketing, registrations, that kind of stuff, have forced some companies and government organizations to look at sort of pure digital or contactless, or some of the stuff that was always on the radar, but now has become front and center, and looks to stay front and center for a long time. So from our perspective, initially it's about how we can help. So we're offering an hour sort of free consultation with some of our smartest brains and best and brightest, just to help share the insights that we've had, to those types of problems and what we see as possible solutions. No obligation, just sort of the product of our thinking. Share with us, some of the problems that you're having. We'll let you know how we think we can help. You can reach us at pastilla.co, and certainly if we can help beyond that, we would be more than open to that conversation.
Okay, guys. So thank you for your input on A/B testing. I hope everybody enjoyed this conversation, and thanks for watching. Leave a comment down below and with any question you want to ask, and don't forget to subscribe.